Greetings, book lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train, and welcome to E-Train Talks. And if you've watched my podcast at all, you'll know that I am a huge, huge fan of the one and only Stuart Gibbs, as you can tell from my wide collection of his books. And have you ever woken up and just said to yourself, today is going to be the best day ever? And it's actually true. I can't begin to express in words just how epic today is for me, and hopefully for those of you listening. Because today, my guest is the incredible writer of the unbelievably entertaining middle grade stories, one of my all-time top adventure and suspense writers out there, Renegade of Middle Grade. Hold on to your hats, everybody, because today I'm talking to the man, the myth, and the legend, the New York Times bestselling, truly awesome, author of the Spy School, Charlie Thorne, Fun Jungle, Space Alpha, and Once Upon a Time novels. You all know him. You all love him. It's Stuart Gibbs, everybody. Woo!
Well, my gosh, that's a lot to live up to, that introduction, but that's very kind of you to say. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, thank you so much for coming, and I think that your books, they're revolutionary for middle grade, and they're just the best. And you being here, everybody, and me included, is jumping up and down. We are so excited to have you. And let's just get into the first question, which of course has to be about your New York Times best-selling series, Ben Ripley's gripping tale, Spy School. And it's just probably my all-time favorite middle grade series. So, everybody, in case you haven't read the books yet, and I highly recommend them, Ben Ripley is a junior CIA agent who was recruited to the top secret spy school. It's an intriguing premise, and you know it. Ben travels on absolutely epic missions around the world, usually thwarting the plans of Murray Hill, his arch nemesis. Every book in the series has been a thrilling page-turning adventure that I gobbled up in one sitting. And if I had to choose my arch nemesis, it would be the fact that I have to wait another year for the next Spy School book. Book 10 just came out, Project X. And of course, I love that one as well. So, my question to you is, have you always been a big fan of spy-themed stories, and did you read them as a kid?
Yeah. I've always liked spy stories. When I was a kid, there was not as much middle grade. Now there wasn't as much written for kids. So a lot of the time, as kids, we read up, and There were great adventure stories, like the Hardy Boys and such. But I was reading like my parents' Robert Ludlum stories when I was a kid, and I actually tried. I found the James Bond movies first, as many people do, and then discovered relatively quickly that the books and the movies were not very similar a lot of the time, which was a big revelation to me. I had assumed that every movie would be like a very tight adaptation of the book, but something like The Man with the Golden Gun was nothing like the book at all. And so I did read those. The idea of Spy School actually came to me when I was younger than you, I think, because I had seen my first James Bond movie, and was writing what we would now call fan fiction about not James Bond, but his son, Jimmy Bond. And Jimmy was not a spy, but he wanted to be a spy like his dad. And I thought, well, to me, one of the jokes was that his dad was never around because he was James Bond. James Bond you never saw him at home. You just saw him traveling off around the world. And so I thought, well, maybe Jimmy's got to go to like a spy school to learn how to be a spy, which was sort of just a little... I didn't really write about the spy school in my story. I just kind of mentioned it, but I always thought, hey, that's a good idea. It's a great way to do sort of a spy series for kids.
Well, I love that. It's just so cool that you come up with these ideas when you were our age, and you never lost that love for spy-themed. Sorry, my voice is a little scratchy.
Oh, no, that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah.
No, I mean, so, I'd say like if there are kids out there and you are interested in writing, it may you usually don't get your book published as a kid. So that doesn't mean you're a bad writer. It just means like that you're still learning. You're still learning your craft. But an idea that you have now could really work out down the road somewhere. So you just got to kind of hold on to those ideas that you think really work. And it may take years, may take decades, but a good idea remains a good idea, I think.
Well, you certainly went on a path that was a bit different than just being writer for middle grade. You, in fact, were in the television industry. That's so cool. So, you wrote films, including some for ABC, Nickelodeon, Disney, and many, many more. Can you share a bit about your film writing career and how that kind of led to middle grade?
Well, the interesting thing to know about the film and television business is it's a very unusual business, especially as a writer, because you can end up writing something that does not get made. And really, I think the success rate for things getting made when I was really deep in this was like about 10%. And now I'm going to bet it's maybe even less for film, but maybe more for television because streaming has created sort of a lot more TV. But it's so it was a sort of you can make a good living as a writer and just never have something you've written see the light of day, which is very different than writing novels. Like if you have if you have a contract to write a book, that book is there's probably a 99% chance that book is going to come out, and the only reason it wouldn't come out is probably like a failure on your part to actually write the story well or finish it or something. And so the film and television business was very exciting and fun, but had sort of a level of frustration as well, because when we talk about like when I was writing things for a lot of those places, I was one of the things you do is you create a television pilot. They have all the writers come in, they pitch pilots, and then everybody writes the pilot, and then maybe they shoot the pilot, maybe they don't, maybe they shoot a pilot, and even when they shoot the pilots, then they put those in front of test audiences to see which ones end up on the air. So it's a very long process to see if anything makes it to the air, and I wrote lots of things that did not make it to the air. And so although it was fun to be in the business, ultimately it started to become a little bit frustrating, and my original love had always been writing novels. I ended up working in movies and television because they were buying my stuff, whereas I wasn't selling books. And then I thought, well, I'm going to try and publish a book. The time has come to do that. I was not really thinking about middle grade. Middle grade was actually kind of new. They really had YA had really sort of come along and doing well. Harry Potter had done very well. But and it wasn't really until like Percy Jackson and Diary of a Wimpy Kid sort of kind of kicked the door open that all the publishers like, oh my gosh, we need more middle grade. And as it happened, I had often had ideas for TV or film, or like I was thinking like, oh, like that whole time, like I could do Spy School as a television show. I could do a television show set in a zoo, and I couldn't move those things forward, but in publishing I could. So the idea that suddenly somebody was like, hey, that a mystery set in a zoo, that's a great sort of story to write for middle grade, or Spy School obviously is a great story to write for middle grade, and that sort of sparked the whole book career. And I really haven't, I still adapt some things of mine for the movies or TV every now and then, but I haven't really once publishing welcomed me in, I was like, all right, see you, movie business. So.
Yeah, well, I hope that you can kind of dabble back into the movie business, maybe for a possible Spy School or Fun Jungle adaptation.
I'm trying so hard. I'm trying, one of these days, I hope, but it has just been, there's been a lot of back and forth, especially with Spy School, but we'll see what we can do.
Well, the whole writing community is rooting for you. And another series that we all love of yours is the Charlie Thorne series. There are 3 books so far, and I love them all. They're so entertaining, and your protagonist, Charlie Thorne, probably top 10, top 5, maybe my favorite protagonist of all time? Was there someone who inspired Charlie's brilliant mind and just downright awesome personality?
Charlie was really kind of inspired by actual geniuses, really. That I I'm the Moonbase Alpha series came because one of my closest friends became an astronaut,
Wow.
and he's brilliant, and he's this brilliant guy. And then through him, I was able to meet other astronauts who are all brilliant, but they're not like when you see really brilliant people on TV and film, a lot of the time they're shown as kind of these social misfits, and I was thinking these guys aren't social misfits, and then when I was came with the idea for Charlie Thorne and wanted to I actually had the idea not for Charlie first, but about the sort of hook of the thing, which is that somebody on the trail of an equation that Einstein had discovered but hidden away because it was too dangerous. And when I started to look at like who Einstein was, we generally think of Einstein as this old guy because that's when we see the photos of him. But he was young at one point, and when Einstein was young, he was he wasn't like he wasn't like the guys we see on Big Bang Theory or whatever. And as I started to do more research on other people, I say, okay, well, let me look at Charles Darwin. And, Darwin was a huge adventurer. He like,
Yeah.
you don't go on a trip around the world on a ship for 2 years. He didn't have to. Like he was, he was he didn't have to be a sailor, but he chose to go on this trip for the adventure and would sort of like and they'd be off in Patagonia, and he'd sort of disappear for a couple of days on a horse, so I was looking at like even sort of these iconic brilliant minds from history. I was thinking, well, people don't really know what they were like as kids, or most people don't think of what they were like as kids, and so I really wanted to sort of take all of that stuff and say, look, here is this person who's a genius, but they are also, they're on one hand acting like a normal teenager, and that they're kind of sassy and rebellious, and on the other hand, she's got plenty of reason to be sassy and rebellious because she's been forced into something she doesn't want to do. She's a good athlete. She's adventurous. I wanted to sort of create because look, kids who read books are smart kids, and I want them to know that there's no shame in being smart, and maybe they're not all. I mean, nobody's really as big a genius as Charlie Thorne is, but a lot of my other characters are very smart and also very funny and socially adept and respected for their intelligence, and I that was all very important for me in creating characters.
Well, you really your characters shine and they're just awesome because they may be brilliant in so many aspects, but they're also kids. Like we can relate to them. I mean, Charlie Thorne, she can see equations in her mind while she's doing all this crazy stuff, but she's still a kid. She's still got all the social wonky donkey kind of stuff that we have to deal with. And I also saw on your website, which is something that I don't really see with many authors, you share the release dates of all of your upcoming books. And like I just get so pumped up. I see a new Charlie Thorne is coming out, a new Spy School, a new Once Upon a Tim, a new Fun Jungle. I'm just so excited. And I know that some of the books are kind of far away, like maybe next year, maybe the year after that. But is there anything you can share about maybe your upcoming Fun Jungle, Spy School, any of those?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the newest Fun Jungle is coming in February. I've got a copy. I'm holding a copy right here. Well done. This is not actually. People are sometimes like, "Hey, wait, how can you have a copy? It's not for sale. It's an advanced copy. It's not quite finished." This is this mystery, as you might be able to tell from the title, involves a whale. It really came. I always tell my readers, kids are always writing to me saying like, oh, you should do this or this or this, and I usually can't take suggestions from readers, but at a certain point when hundreds of kids kept saying, oh, there should be something that has to do with a whale or some kind of marine creature, I was like, okay, let me try and figure that out, and that did involve, like, when I wanted to do a whale, I had to move it out of Fun Jungle. I know that there are places like SeaWorld that have like orcas and whatever, but you really can't put a whale into I mean, if you're gonna do a whale, you might as well go like blue whale, right? Get the largest animal that's ever lived, and because there's so many fascinating things about them. And that meant that I actually couldn't even do it in Texas because there's no whales in Texas. So that had been my original thought, was that I do Texas. They just go down to the coast there. But I had to come up with a way to shift the story. And I actually moved it to where I live. I moved it to Southern California. So it makes it the first time I've ever written a book that takes place where I live. And so it was fun because I could, if I wanted to do research this time, I just had, it was actually, it was during COVID. So for the first time, I'd just jump in my car and drive out to Malibu or drive down to the Long Beach Aquarium. It was somewhat based on the experiences I've had living here because, I had always sort of grown up thinking like, okay, well, I'll be lucky if I ever get to see a blue whale, but you can actually see blue whales not far off the coast of California. You can go out, and the first time I ever went out to kind of see them, just on a basic whale watching trip, had my kids, and we saw blue whales, and that's just to see something that's the size bigger than the boat that you're on, swimming around you is just unbelievable. So I kind of took some of that, and there's I don't want to give away too much of what's going on, but you get to see a little bit of what I know about living in Los Angeles in this book, and I learned a lot of fascinating stuff about whales and other sea life like sea lions and seals and such, and so that all comes into play in the book.
Well, I just have one question. When you write the Fun Jungle books, do you have to think of the pun first? Because all of your books have awesome puns.
The pun is the last thing, actually. Really? Yeah, well, you notice if you look at the first three books in the series, there weren't puns, and then Pandemonium came because I was doing research for Big Game at the San Diego Zoo, where they were taking me around, and so that zoo has been amazingly helpful, introducing me to keepers and people like that, and like getting me somebody to sort of take me from place to place. And so we're talking to some of the keepers. They said, we have to do pandas, right? Like people love pandas more than they're more panda fans than anything. And I said, okay, well, that does make sense. And they said, and you got to call it Pandemonium, which was a rare time when I had the title first, but I didn't come up with the title. They told me that, and then we did Pandemonium, and then it sort of became this thing. Okay, we're going to do puns, and with Whale Done, we actually got to the point where I was working on the book, and all my author friends were sort of saying like, okay, we're going to see who can come up with the best title for the book. And so lots of authors, some of whom I know you've even had on the program, were suggesting things, and we had some titles like Twist and Spout and License to Krill. And actually, one of my close friends is the author Julie Buxbaum, who has mostly done middle grade, but it just did an amazing series called the Area 51 Files that just started, and which is hilarious. And Julie's husband was the one who came up with Well Done, and we threw that in the mix, and I actually sent all the titles off to my publishing company, and my publisher sort of wrote back and said, I just heard the title Well Done and snort laughed, and so that's the title of the book. So we're like, okay.
Well, I find puns very punny, so I'm glad that you made that addition.
I love them. But I always feel like you should, I mostly, Pandemonium being a rare case, but usually I write the book first and then try and come up with like sometimes I might have something in the back of my head, but I never really lock the title in until way down the road.
Well, speaking of your Fun Jungle series, since we're on the topic of animals and all that, I read that on your website that the Fun Jungle series kind of came to you thanks to an assignment that you had in college. You were studying biology, which I find a really interesting subject, and you worked at with the Philadelphia Zoo.
Yes, that's true.
So I'm interested to know if you didn't become an author, would you have pursued a career in biology or zoology?
Oh yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, like I've always been fascinated by zoos, always been fascinated by animals. And when I was if I didn't love writing more than than animals, I would certainly have just said, okay, that's my career. And if writing hadn't worked out, I mean, really, I did have to like make a choice at one point, like saying like, oh, do I keep, I do I try to go down to South America and study capybaras in the wild, or do I go off to Hollywood and try and become a writer? And I just thought, well, I had to give writing that shot.
Well, we are all so glad that you did, because if you didn't take that shot, you wouldn't have had Spy School, Charlie Thorne, Space Base Alpha, The Last Musketeer series, well, all of your books. And
Look, I'll say now, I mean, things have changed, and at the time there was no way, there was no internet back then. There weren't really portable computers. Like the idea, like I couldn't think, like now you could probably say, oh, I'm going to be a field biologist and go some really remote place and bring your laptop computer and
mhm.
write and try and email scripts to people on occasion. Maybe you couldn't do it from the deepest part of the Amazon, but could it be done now? Yeah, it probably could. Like your generation is not going to be quite as limited in those sorts of things. Choices, maybe. I mean, I look, if I had gone down there and sold a book, I probably would have maybe put that career on hold anyhow. But it was not an option that I had. I had to really go one or the other.
Mhm. Well, I saw on Instagram that you visited the beautiful Victoria Falls,
Yeah.
and you also went and stalked a leopard in
Oh yeah,
Botswana and traveled across Africa on a safari.
yeah.
So, can you tell us a bit about your incredible adventure? And did your venture on these trips was it a little bit of research for upcoming middle grade novels?
Yeah, yeah. You look, it's. I mean, look, you any trip is practically research at this point, no matter where I go, because I find that one of the best ways to get inspired is to see as much of the world as you can, which doesn't just mean you have to travel around the world. It means explore your own city, go to museums, go to zoos, go read as much as you can. But given my love of animals, I safari is one of my uh, uh, favorite things to do. I've been lucky enough. This was actually the sixth time I had gone on safari. It's
Wow.
different. This was the second time in Botswana, but it does like every time you go, it's going to be different, and which is one of the amazing things about it. And it's great if you like animals, because you have such amazing experiences seeing animals, but also just the experiences you get being in these countries, meeting you're with a guide for several hours a day. You actually sort of get to know your guides pretty well, and then again, thanks to modern communication, you can stay in touch with them, and so it's just you meet other people who care enough about animals, and they've come on this whole way to go on safari as well. So the whole and it is one of these places where you are kind of cut off. You're not on the internet the whole time. You probably don't even have phone service, and so you're just in this world of just being in the moment and seeing what you find every day, and is and just having just one amazing experience after another.
Well, that is awesome, and that sounded like such a great adventure. And yeah, I probably would want to go on that safari next time. Like,
All right, all
book
right.
me a trip.
I know it's not the easiest thing to get to and do, but it is just it is an amazing experience.
It sounds like it. And while I haven't read one of your newer series, which is illustrated, and it looks awesome. The Once Upon a Tim books, your first illustrated series. The premise and just everything about it seems right up my alley. I just love the idea of zooming in on a background character, or I guess now they're a main character,
Right,
in
right.
this kind of fairy tale world. But it's not always a fairy tale world, especially when you're Tim. And just everything about that, just that line, one paragraph about your book, and I was like, I'm hooked. I need to read this. So, what really sparked this book idea?
Well, as now you're going to theme, it's often I have ideas for quite a long time before I write them. And Tim was originally an idea I thought maybe would work as a television show, like an animated show. I was deep watching, watching Disney movies over and over and over again with my kids, and was thinking, look, these are mostly about royalty. They've sort of tried to shake things up in recent years, but there were mostly a princess. Occasionally there was a prince involved, and they were always kind of having a bad day or something like that. But you were thinking, all right, like, okay, I know the princess is having a bad day, but you know who's also having a bad day? Everybody else in her kingdom, because they're peasants, and it's terrible being a peasant. And yet we never see, they never made a Disney movie about a peasant. And I was just thinking, like, well, wouldn't it be fun to, um, I mean, I guess you could say, okay, Aladdin, is a little bit right like that, but there's still a princess in that story who's still like acting very hard done by, and so I was thinking, like, right, well, what if right, it looked like we were going to tell this story of this prince or this princess, and then we zoomed in on that little background character and said that's the person whose story we're going to tell, and that's actually visually what we even do at the beginning of Once Upon a Tim. And yeah, it just like I had this idea, hadn't really done anything with it, and then right at the beginning of the pandemic, my publisher asked if I would have any interest doing, an illustrated series, collaborating with the artist. That sounded like a lot of fun to me, and I thought, hey, this idea I've had kicking around for a decade would really work really well in this world. So, or that's a good way to tell it. So it worked out. It's been a tremendous amount of fun. It's been great to work with Stacy Curtis, my illustrator. So I've just seen the illustrations for book 3, which comes out
Ooh.
in May, and they're fantastic. And so yeah, then there'll be a book 4, and hopefully more after that.
Disney, hire this man right now. I love everything I hear. Like, every single sentence, every single word. I'm so close to just jumping out of my seat right now and going to my local bookstore and finding myself a copy of Once Upon a Tim. I mean, well, speaking of Disney, they have Marvel, but DC has got Stuart Gibbs now because he's making his dreams come true, and he is, which the book is coming out March 14th, 2023. He is publishing a Batman graphic novel with DC. Wow!
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing news. And I know you can't give away many spoilers about the story, but can you share if you've always been a DC Comics fan and how this, like, mind-blowing opportunity came about?
Well, I mean, I was always a Batman fan. That was kind of the amazing thing about all this. And again, these things all take time. This was, it was before the pandemic. I happened to honestly run into a guy I knew. Well, he was trick or treating with his kids on my street, and he said, "Oh, I'm over at DC now. We're trying to get some middle grade and YA authors to do some graphic novels." And it actually turned out I had a couple friends who'd already done this, so I said, okay, well, I'll go in. And I really was like just at lunch with one of the executives, and she said to me, well, do you like Batman? Because we really don't have anybody doing any Batman stuff. And I was like, what? Like, of course I want to do Batman. And so I really was almost on the spot that at that point, because I was talking about, what I'd always loved about Batman was the idea that he was the only superhero I could grow up to be, right? Everybody else has got superpowers one way or another. Batman does not have superpowers. He's a smart guy. Again, this goes back to the idea about, like having a smart
Yeah.
person. And he does have quite a lot of money, so he can fund all kinds of stuff. But I was really sort of thinking like, okay, well, what if we put Bruce Wayne in middle school, and he's the only kid at his school who does not have powers, but at the same time, he's the only one who also wants to fight crime. Like he really wants to grow up and do so. But meanwhile, everybody else is just, they're just being regular teens. They're Clark Kent is really good at dodgeball and sports, and like Bruce can't win anything. He can't, Arthur Curry, like Aquaman is easily the best guy on the swim team. The Flash just, like Bruce can't win a race. He can't, he's not even the smartest kid in his school, because there's a couple future villains there who are super smart, and so you take that sort of world of which I think in middle school kind of sometimes can feel like, okay, you're the only person who doesn't have superpowers or something like that, and so he and it just seemed like a good springboard for a story, maybe a bit of a Batman origin story. And so I sort of jumped through all these hoops to sort of get this moving, and then one of the editors called me up and said, okay, it looks like we're going to do this. And he's like, I really can't believe that they picked this up, because like everybody wants to do Batman. I was like, oh, I was told nobody wanted to do Batman. And he's like, oh, no, like like everybody wants to do it. It just happens to be that I came up with an idea that they thought worked. I will say I could not be happier with the art on this. It's just wonderful. It's on one hand standard comic book art, but on the other hand, it's so funny. The guy who did is I'm going to mess up his last name. His first name's Barat. His last name is like Pekmetsi. He may be Polish actually. He's like working out of somewhere in Eastern Europe, and it's just he's phenomenally talented. It's just such a great visual feast to see this book.
I love that term, visual feast. And my eyebrows shot up when you talked about the new Batman story. Like, I feel like what you said about in middle school, you feel like you're the only person without superpowers. That makes a lot of sense, because like you feel like you're just alone in this world. As a middle schooler, I can kind of agree with that statement. And
sadly, I think everybody pretty much can, yeah. So.
Yeah, and I just cannot wait for this comic/graphic novel to come out. My dad actually, when he heard the news, he got super excited as well, because he loves DC, Marvel. So, and I'm sure all my friends who they love the Spy School books, so they're gonna be pretty hyped and excited when they hear the news as well.
I hope so. I hope we. Yeah, your dad would not be the only. I have a lot. There are lots and lots of guys who and women who sort of are very excited about Batman. It really does sort of, look, Batman's been around for 60 years, maybe even longer, longer than James Bond. So there's plenty of fans of his.
Yeah, and just congratulations, because that's awesome news. And if this is a question I ask every single person I interview, whether they're an author, book lover, kindness advocate, if you could be or meet any literary character, it could be your favorite author or your favorite character in a book, who would it be and why?
Oh man, now you can put favorite author in there, because you're right. I had been thinking like favorite, like they're definitely favorite character, like and I mean, this is not quite a character for kids, but Fletch, which there's sort of they just did a Fletch movie, but which is like the third Fletch movie. The first Fletch movie came out in the 1980s, but the books are really, he's such a wonderful character, and he's sort of this very intelligent troublemaker, and who I always loved, and I kind of in a sense, wanted that that writing style is very dialogue heavy, which was I was really trying to uh, do that in spy school. I was really trying to kind of have that kind of attitude there. But then if I could hang out with an author, I'd really like to hang out with Carl Hyacin, who has written some great middle grade, but also just some really great adult books, and was very influential on me in creating the Fun Jungle series. So I hope he's as funny as his writing. I think it would be a tremendous amount of fun to meet him. One of the nice things about this business is I've gotten to meet occasionally, certainly a lot of the great middle grade writers that I like, and become friends with them. But I occasionally get to meet a great writer of books that I've loved my whole life. So I don't know, like if you've read any of Terry Pratchett's stuff, who he did veer into middle grade a little bit later in his career, but he was a great writer of like fantasy comedy, and also one of the funniest writers of all time. And so I was able to meet him at one point. So yeah, there are a tremendous number of real authors who I'd love the chance to meet.
That's awesome. And while I have not seen the Fletch movies, I think that I'm gonna have to check them out. And that's
I'll
such
say this actually, the at least the first one, it's actually I think one of the best adaptations of a book into movie ever done, in the sense
really.
that it the book is almost entirely dialogue, and obviously the movie can't be, and so they had to sort of create a different thing, and so they have this sort of joke in the movie that Fletch is constantly pretending to be other people, and uh, and it works really well in the movie, but the movie's not. It's like a great understanding that a book is not a movie, and that it's the same story but told differently enough that the movie is very engaging, but the book is engaging in an entirely different way.
I love that. I need to check out those movies.
Okay.
And I also need to check out all the rest of your books. Today has been such a special day. To be able to talk to one of my all-time favorite authors, a master of storytelling, is seriously a day that I will never forget. Thank you so much for joining me, Stuart. And
Thank you so much for having me.
so, thank you so much for joining me. Everybody, you can follow Stuart on social media and on his website, stuartgibbs.com. It's been the best day ever. And with that, we are signing off for now. Everybody,
it's been a pleasure, E-Train.
Thank you so much for coming. Everybody, read his books. You won't regret it. Bye.